Hey guys, so I have a confession to make. I'm in a really bad mood this morning. I got up, I've played 4 games of rapid chess and I've lost 3 of them and I absolutely sucked. So it's left me in a very bad mood, and it got me thinking, what do you do when you are just playing badly? And there are a couple of approaches. One is, my general piece of advice is, if you're just playing badly, it could be a sign that you're tired or your brain's just exhausted and you're slow and you really can't play to your normal standard. And generally, if you're playing online, it doesn't really matter. Then my general advice there would be to stop playing. You know, when you've got a day when you're sharp, you're spotting things, you're playing well, you've got that right balance of attack and defense, then keep playing, because that's the way to get, win more games, increase your rating on that day. But the counterpoint to that is that if you're playing badly, don't chase your losses. This is something that people talk about in gambling, right? If you're gambling, if you've lost money, don't think, oh no, I'm down 10 or 20 or whatever it is, I need to get that back, and then you become desperate and you become reckless in your gaming. And very much the same thing happens in chess. So that's one approach, is simply, if it's not super important, then just stop, go and do something else, rest, get on with your work, go and entertain yourself, whatever you need to do to relax, and then come back when you're ready, come back when you're sharp. Now, the other approach is to conquer those feelings of desperation and panic, and find a way psychologically to put those away. And we do have tools to help you do that to some extent, because we've got this, the general chess bootcamp approach is slow down, take your time, always consider what is my opponent's intention with that last move, always consider king safety first, right? And then use your time, calculate and figure it out. So what I'm going to try and do in this video is I'm going to try and channel that frustration and anger of being on a losing streak and try and see if I can turn it around. So I'm going to play a 30-minute rapid game live, and I'm going to see if I can apply those general principles and try and win a game. Okay. So, game has started here. I don't know what my opponent's rating is, but it's probably around mine, which is down 1360, something like that. And they've started with e4, so I'm going to play e6, which is my general approach at the moment. I'm going to start with the French defense. And I know generally what I'm doing with the French. I know generally what my attacking ideas are going to be. But more than anything else, I'm just going to breathe. I'm going to take my time. I've got 30 minutes on the clock, and I intend to use those 30 minutes. And I also intend to do whatever it takes to win this game. Okay, so my opponent's played bishop to b5, pointing at my king. This is not a common theme that you find in the French. I don't see that very often. So I can't play my normal d5, because I would normally have expected d4 to follow. c5 is a frequent move, a common move in the French. Another idea I've got could be a6 to kick the bishop away. If the bishop goes to a5, I do have b5 and then force the bishop back. Generally, these pawns on this side I will be pushing up the board at some point in time, but it's not really my idea to push my A and B pawns too early. Generally in the French you want to play d5 and c5 and go from there. So c6 is an idea. c6 would stop the bishop's idea because it would really close off that diagonal towards the king. But normally I want to play c5, so playing c6 first and then maybe c5 later could be slow. So let's pause and reflect. Another idea could be to ignore that threat, because it's not really a threat. He can't capture on d7. I could play knight to f6 and harass this pawn. But then if the pawn moves forward, my knight may have problems. It's probably going to have to go back to its starting place on g8, so that's not very attractive either. So let me think. I'm going to play a6, put the question to the bishop, and see what he intends to do. Okay, he's moved back to a4, like we anticipated. I can now get in c5. I suppose I could have played c5 on the last go as well. That's still an option. So let's play c5 now. Or do I want to play b5 and kick the bishop back? It's only got one square to there. Let's play that. I'm going to play that, and I'm going to try and gain some space here on the queen side, on this area of the board. Okay, so he's gone back there. Okay, so that bishop is now not really a threat. It's looking at a pair of pawns in a short chain. I can now play c5 and then get my knight out to c6. So let's do that. I've used a little bit of time already, but I'm not going to panic, because what we're practicing here is not sucking at chess. Okay, the way you suck at chess is to fail to consider the consequences of every move, and to fail to consider your options, and to rush moves to try and bully and harass your opponent when you're not really in a position to do so. But this bringing this bishop out so far so early onto the 5th rank has given me the opportunity to cause some trouble. Now there's a clear threat here, and the threat is that I play c4, and that would trap the bishop. It's only got 2 squares it can go to. Both squares would be occupied by pawns, and the bishop would be lost. So really he only has 2 ideas here. Okay, yeah, he could either move his a pawn or his c pawn, but now you can see that that bishop is now kind of trapped and hindered by his own pawn. Maybe he might intend to capture on b5, in which case I would probably be recapturing with my a pawn. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because his pawn is captured towards the outside of the board, and I would be capturing inwards, which means that he would have no c pawn, I would have no a pawn, but that leaves me in a slightly stronger position. d5 right now is not an option, because it's guarded by 3 pieces and only defended by 2. It would be defended by the pawn on e6 and by my queen, so that's not an option. If I capture on c, if b takes c, then he can just recapture with the bishop, and his bishop's now in a stronger position. So I don't want that. So d5 is out. I have maybe knight to c6. Is there any reason not to play knight to c6 now? Another idea would be queen to b6. I'm going to play knight to c6. I'm going to hover and wait. There's no serious threat. None of his other pieces are developed. His queen can't really do anything bad at this time. If he captures here, I'm going to recapture. And then my bishop could then go to a6, looking down here at the f1 square, which is where his rook is likely to end up, because having made this c4 move, is very unlikely to want to castle queenside. So he's moved his knight out to f3, probably anticipating castling kingside. Okay, and breathe. This pawn is undefended. I could play knight f6, attacking the pawn, but then again, if the pawn progresses, I can't move back to d7, which is a normal square. I could think about playing d6 here. That's an idea. But again, then that blocks off this nice dark diagonal for my queen. Taking my time. I've got 30 minutes on the clock, which generally means that I could think about using 10 minutes for the opening, 10 minutes for the middle game, and 10 minutes for the end game. That would be a good use of time. My opponent's been, relatively speaking, taking a lot less time. I could move knight to a5, attacking the bishop. Bishop could then move back to c2. That doesn't really help me in any way. Pushing e5 is an idea, but then that means that I've got a backwards pawn on d7, which makes it harder to play d5 at some point in the future. I could simply develop my bishop there to e7, maybe preparing to castle. That's an idea, so let's play that. It means that my bishop's doing more there, because here on f8 it's only got 2 squares it's looking at. Here it's got 1, 2, 3 and 4, and also defending that. So this slightly improves my dark squared bishop. Okay, we have d3 played. That creates a little pocket there that I could drop my knight into, attacking his knight and his bishop. Is there a reason to do that right now? Now if I play knight f6, then e5, that's still not much better. I can't push a5 because pawn takes and attacks the knight. f6 is a possibility, but that opens up the diagonal towards my king, although his queen can't come out at this point because the knight's in the way. Kind of drawn to d6. My knight could come into b4. Is there any real reason to do that? It's attacking this pawn, but it's the only attacker and it's defended by a queen. It's causing me some problems in this game. How about bishop to b7, putting it on the nice diagonal there? There's no great reason not to do that. I'm going to play that move. Leave myself ideas about moving the knight at some point. If this pawn advances, then the bishop's looking quite strong on that diagonal. My opponent's last move, moving that pawn there, means that his bishop can come out. It can't come here because that's guarded by 2 pieces. How about this square for his bishop? Has he got ideas there? Okay, knight to c3. Now, something I'll quite often do is when a piece moves out, I'll go, okay, well, where could that piece be heading? Okay, now it can't go there because it'll be taken by a pawn. It can't go there because he's got his own pawn there. He can't go there because it'll be taken by a pawn. He can't go there. So what's the idea and purpose of that move? Because if I push b4 now, that's going to kick the knight, but the knight could come to a4 and then maybe in here, but the queen's guarding that, so let's go ahead and push that. Idea is now of pushing the a pawn up and really gaining more space there on the queen side and pushing his bishop back. Okay, so his knight's moved back. I don't think that's really strengthened his case at this point in time. The knight can now move to f4 or g3, and I'm thinking now that maybe it might be time to push e5, where it's defended by a knight, and it takes away this square, the f4 square, from his knight. I could then back that up with d6, or I could play d6 first. Play d6 first, and then if his knight comes to here, I have this move to kick the knight away, which means he has to move his knight again, which gains me a tempo. Still haven't completed development. I've still got a knight to get out of the way in castle kingside. But now that I've cleared this d7 square, I can play knight f6, and then if the pawn pushes, in fact I can capture the pawn now, because I've got 2 pieces looking at that square, and there's no defender. Well, there's one defender, there's the knight, but if pawn takes, let's calculate. He goes there, pawn takes, knight takes, he loses a piece. and it really opens up this diagonal for my bishop, so he's not going to want to play that move. The queen's got very few options at this point in time. That's good. He'll probably castle. There he goes. Okay. Now I'm thinking about knight f6, because this move is still not an option for white, so let's do that. That's my last minor piece out into the board, and now I'm getting ready to castle myself. I'm not worried about this bishop. That's all good. Bishop could come to here, but even so. Once I've castled, that's not an issue. That's a possibility, bringing in his bishop to harass my knight, but that doesn't really concern me. If he takes and my bishop recaptures, then my dark square bishop is now on that long diagonal pointing towards his rook in the corner. $12.84. Okay. So I'm currently about 80 points higher than my opponent, but the way I'm playing today, that's not really much to write home about, because I'm normally 100 points higher than that. Normally trying to play around the 1450 mark. And let's see what my opponent decides to do. So quite often ideas that I have in the French is sometimes manoeuvring my dark squared bishop round, putting my queen on the same diagonal, and then if I can clear this knight out of the way, I've got ideas of queen h2 checkmate. That's a common threat that I like to work out. Okay, he's moved his bishop out, but only to d2. I don't really understand the point of that move, because he can't go here, he can't take the pawn, he'll get captured either way. Is he thinking about pushing a3? Is there any reason not to push a5 now and overprotect that pawn, or should I just castle? There's no reason to castle immediately, so I'm going to push that one. I'm now getting towards 20 minutes in the game. I can't push a4 because he has the bishop and the queen lined up against that square. If the queen wasn't there, then I could push that and the pawn would be safe. Okay, he's gone ahead and done that move that we expected. If he captures on b4, I can recapture with my pawn. He could then swap off his rook for my rook, and I'll put my queen in the corner. That's not the end of the world. I'd have queen and bishop lined up on there. And there's no reason for me to castle right now. Sorry, to capture right now on a3. That's moving my pawn outwards. I'm going to go ahead and castle. Means I've now got my rook, my queen, and my other rook all lined up on the back rank. So if he captures now, I can simply recapture with a4, and I'm okay. I can even now move my queen out to one of these squares if I want, and then if his rook comes down and captures, I recapture with my other rook, and that's alright. It means that the A file is then not available for his queen. His queen can't move across to here, because it'd be guided by a rook instead of a queen. Still not worried about e5. Okay, so he's trying to improve his bishop. That's fine. I don't mind if bishop takes, that's okay for me. There's no point spending 2 moves to maneuver my bishop round there. Do we have any tactical ideas? Do we have any attacking ideas at this point? e5 is an idea, creates this kind of potentially this reversed, this diamond in the middle, which makes it very hard for the pawns to advance. If that happens, then it makes it more of a knight's game than a bishop's game, because when the middle of the board is all clogged up, bishops have fewer options and knights can sometimes slip through the gaps. Don't really want to move my knight to there. If knight there takes, and then I've got queen takes d3. That might be okay. Gives me 2 pawns here towards where the king is, on the king's side of the board. Certainly don't want to move my knight into there. But knight here is a possibility. Takes, and then he's got a weak pawn, this backwards pawn, which will probably end up pushing. So nothing really attractive at that point. Could I manoeuvre my knight round here maybe? That's a possibility. Yeah, I would like to get rid of this knight because this knight is the defender of h2, and h2 could be a target. So let's move my knight round to there. If bishop captures, and alternatively I can move one of my knights, either one, to here. But if I put a knight on there and we have knight captures, pawn captures, then I have a pawn on e5, which is really blocking off this nice diagonal, which is my primary attacking idea. I've also got knight b6 threatening the bishop. That would bring his queen out to a4. So if bishop captures and bishop captures, it means I've still got the bishop pair. I've got 2 bishops on the board, which means that I want to be going for a game where the board is more open and my bishops have lots of options. As it stands, we are undecided about whether we're going to have an open centre or a closed centre. My opponent's taking his time. If pawn takes, recapture with A, and that puts pressure on this bishop. Not too much though, I mean, it's guarded by the queen and the rook. So what's he going to do? He can't move a knight onto there because of the pawn. He can't move a knight onto there because there's no other defender of that square, so I'd recapture with my knight or my pawn. So his knights don't have lots of options. He can't move a knight to here because I've got 2 pieces. They're attacking that square and only one other defender. Okay, so he's pushing in the middle. Right. Now, is he thinking about playing d5 and attacking my knight and this pawn? Is that a concern if he does? Could I move my knight to there, attacking his bishop? If he pushes there, where's my knight going to go? It's only got 2 squares, really. It's got 3, I suppose. It could go here. Then if knight takes, pawn takes. But then I'm blocking up my diagonals towards the king. 2 defenders of d4 and only 2 attackers. So if I capture, he recaptures. And I can't then recapture with the knight because I lose a piece. Is that a bad thing for me? Well, no, I can recapture with a knight. It means I don't win the exchange. Okay, so let's say pawn captures, knight captures, knight captures, knight captures. How does that look? Well, here's how it looks. It means that these pawns have gone, this knight's gone, and one of these knights is gone, and he's got a knight on here. Which means he's got 1 pawn there in the middle. The middle of the board's opening up quite well, but I don't know if that makes things any better for yours truly. But it is opening up the board. Then do I have to worry about over here? Say pawn takes, bishop takes, and if my knight isn't there anymore, has his bishop become stronger? So I don't see any great benefit of doing an exchange here on d4. So I think I'm going to bide my time. I'm just going to move my knight back. Don't really want to exchange my knight because my knights are quite mobile and they're in good position for this bishop on the side, because this bishop's not really, hasn't got any threats right now. It's not a strong piece. If pawn takes, takes. If pawn advances, I might capture pawn takes, and then he's got an isolated pawn there on d5, and that could be a target later on, and it's opened up the e-file for me. So if pawn takes, takes, that's okay. Still don't really have a threat. I've just noticed that bishop to a6, this pawn is now undefended. From his last move, you see. What changed? Okay, he's pushed. Right, he's gone for the pawn push. Now if I capture, let's say he captures, means he's got 2 pawns in the middle. Then my knight can come into here. If I move my knight out of the way, say to there, and he captures and I capture, then I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got a nice pawn chain in the middle. So, which one? I'm going to move my knight. I think if he captures there and I recapture, it's opening up possibilities for my rook. The trick here is not to panic. Remain calm. Take your time. Calculate. So he now has 2 undefended pawns on the board. There's 1, there's 2. Now he's just protected this one with that move. But I can now move this. If I move my bishop there, there's an undefended pawn, and it's also x-raying the rook on f1. It'll probably prompt the pawn to move forward. If that happens, this bishop is absolutely trapped. So let's just have a prod at that. I'm expecting b3, and I think that b3 will be in my favour, because what I've then got options. I can move my bishop back to c8, advance this pawn, and then my bishop is now looking at this side of the board. Whereas his light squared bishop would then be imprisoned on this diagonal, where it doesn't have many options. Could come down to here, in which case I take with the knight. Come here, in which case I can take with the bishop if the bishop's still there. That's not too bad. Let's think about this e5 push. e5 push would block off the middle of the board, but I would still have this diagonal potentially. So that leaves his light squared bishop weak and my light squared bishop still with options. My dark squared bishop has got no employment at this point in the game, but as soon as this knight moves out of the way, then it might do. I think I want to avoid moving a knight onto this square, so which means that this knight's kind of trapped as well, because it means he can swap off his bad piece if that happens. I still don't have an attack in mind. He's taking his time over this last move, so he's got a pawn undefended there. He can defend with a queen or a rook to c1. He can't move his knight back to... Okay, he's moved his bishop back. That's unusual. It means I can just grab this pawn and threaten the rook. Okay, so he can't block with the bishop because I just take that. He can't block with the queen. He's going to have to move his rook to e1. That then removes one of the defenders of f2. But I don't really have options down this dark diagonal at this point. But it means I've grabbed a pawn. A pawn is a pawn. It's not a bad idea. It also means I've got 2 attackers now on d5, so I could think about pawn takes, if pawn takes, bishop takes. And that grabs another pawn. If pawn takes there, I've got bishop takes as well. But his first problem is that threat. So he's going to be forced to move rook e1. Okay, he's missed it. I'm just going to grab the rook. I'm happy with that. I notice now that moving my knight back to b8 means that Okay. This means that my queen and my rook are no longer connected, so I do now want to think about moving that knight out. I can't capture there with the a-pawn because I would lose a rook. Okay. So basically right now I'm up the exchange. I've lost my light squared bishop and he's lost a rook. Other than that, we're kind of equal. So I've now got ideas of maybe capture with the c-pawn. It's a free pawn. Why not? And then that really starts to open up these lines down the board. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Bishop can recapture actually, because if I missed that one. Bishop can retake, but it doesn't matter. It's an exchange of bishops. I should have maybe moved my knight to d7 first to protect this rook. That would have been a better idea. But my opponent has made a couple of errors. So I'm hoping that psychologically he's now thinking, oh no, I need to rescue this game. Oh no, I need to do something quick and come up with an idea. Okay, he's done that. Right, so I'm going to have to move the knight there anyway, which means that there is now a threat that I could capture the bishop and my rook's protected. He could also capture this piece. No, he can't, because I've got two pieces looking at that pawn. I've got the queen and the rook. So if bishop takes, say bishop takes, I've got rook takes, and he can't recapture. Well, he can exchange rooks if he wants to, but he's lost a piece for a pawn if he does that. And this board is really now starting to open up. What's undefended? The pawn on b2 is undefended. That's defended. Everything else is kind of okay. Bishop's defending that one. Okay, right, he's moved back. His pawn's defended twice. I'm thinking now it's time to bring Queenie out to maybe here with a threat against b2. Let's play that move. Is there anything wrong with that move? I'm hovering with a piece. I'm not going to drop it until I'm sure that I haven't left anything going on silly, but there's also some tension here. So do I need to think about maybe pushing e5? Yeah, do you know, I'm going to push e5, and the reason is because we've now got, as we've been saying, has blocked up central squares, and what that means is that his bishops can't get through this barrier, right? His bishops are going to have to come round it and do something else. So I've still got ideas now. I've moved my queen maybe to b6, possibly b5 with check. I do need to release this dark squared bishop at some point, which means probably getting my knight on f6 out of the way. I'd like to be attacking this. Currently it's defended twice, but if I can do something maybe with my queen, maybe there's nothing really right now. I can't go to there and I can't go to there to attack the pawn. Aha. Okay, what's his plan here? He can sacrifice the knight on g7. He can grab my dark squared bishop. Do you know what? I would love it if he grabbed my dark squared bishop, because this is a game kind of for knights at the moment. If he grabs the dark squared, the queen is the only defender right now, so it means I can't move my queen out. Should I maybe push g6 and put the question to the bishop? That could then invite bishop h6, or shall I move my rook now? I'm going to move my rook to e8, just defending the bishop, which means that my queen can enter the game over here with some ideas of checks. What else has that knight move done? It's removed one of the defenders of this pawn. So now if I can put another attacker on there, if I can attack that pawn again, and one idea is knight there to c5. Knight to c5 means there's two attackers now on this pawn and only one defender. And this knight isn't doing an awful lot down there, so I would like to move my knight, if I possibly can, towards the enemy king. Because knights can only reach so far. So if the knight captures the bishop on e7, do I recapture with a queen or with a rook? Thinking maybe the queen even at this point, because I'd like to leave my rooks connected. Connected rooks are far stronger than individual ones. Whether they're connected on a rank like that, okay, he's gone for it. So I'm in check. I can recapture with 2 pieces, so recapture is the obvious choice. If I recapture with a queen, does my queen have a better future working from the e7 square or from somewhere like here? I'm going to recapture with a rook. The rook can always just move back and then move back to here. It takes me some time, but I'm in a relatively strong position. I'm up an exchange, okay. He's now threatening my knight. These knights are paired right now, that's okay. Just move my rook back. I quite often get bishops and rooks mixed up. It's just one of those funny psychological blind spots. Okay, this pawn is currently defended once. This pawn is still undefended. So I can quite happily go ahead and play queen to b6. That means then that my queen is looking at the f2 square. Now, then if I move my knight to there, I've got 2 attackers on that square. Okay, what's your idea there, mate? Not quite sure. Does he want to come in here? Don't really see the value in that, so I'm going to move my queen out. Threatening b2. Also now potentially threatening knight to g4, looking at f2. I know I can't move knight to g4 now because since he moved his knight, the queen is now guarding that square. Okay, he's moved in. Why has he moved in? He can't go there because rook takes. Is he thinking of going there? I'm going to push and ask the question. Let's see what happens. If he plays knight e7, I capture with a rook. If he plays knight g7, I capture with a king. I think that was one of those moves where he didn't really have an idea. Okay, he's gone in with check. That's fine. I'm just going to move king g7. I couldn't move to g8 because he could capture f7. So he's got pieces around my king right now, but they're not really threatening. I've still got this attack on b2. This pawn's defended, defended, defended. The knights are defending each other. If the bishop moves there and say knight recaptures, this knight's now on pre and undefended. Okay, he's pushing him with a pawn. Not really much of a threat, so I'm going to go ahead and instantly grab there. If the pawn pushes again, I can capture with the knight because the queen can't recapture. That square is still defended by a pawn, so it's defending its bishop, but that's all. And I'm now up 3 points. Alright, so his rook has moved across to kick my queen away. And remember now, what do I have? Do I have this? So I want to be attacking the king. I want to be attacking f2. This knight can move there. No, it can't move there. It'll be taken as that's attacked twice. That's defended by the bishop. So I'm going to have to move my queen off the b file. I think I'm just going to move it here, where I can move back with check. And also, that would be a second attacker on there, and this knight can then capture. So that's my idea. I've got 11 minutes on the clock. The middle game is in full swing. I need to be a little bit careful about time. I don't want to be rushing at the end of the game, but I haven't rushed at any point so far, which is a good thing. So what's the material situation? I think, what am I up? An exchange and 1 pawn. And that is a reasonable advantage to carry into the ending. This move is looking good now. Queen to c4, it comes with check, and it means that I can grab a pawn. It also means that I could advance a4, because I've got 2 defenders and 2 attackers. So bishop can't take, bishop gets lost. So with these exchanges that you have to calculate, you have to be thinking about the value of the pieces. Okay. Alright, so he's defended that pawn, but that pawn isn't really my target. It kind of was. What he's done now is he's opened up his king a little bit more. I don't have a dark squared bishop, and my queen can't do all the work at this point. So, one idea is to bring this knight around, okay? Because the fact whenever a piece moves, particularly a pawn moves, you have to think, how does that change the structure of the game? Because when pawns move, it changes the structure of the game more significantly. So I've got an idea now of knight h5, knight g3 check. That could be good. Maybe I should throw in another check first. That might invite bishop to there, but that's okay. Alright, so I could force the exchange now. If I played queen to d4, I'm attacking the queen and the king. That would force an exchange, but that would double my pawns. So I think the next idea, is it any good to come in with this knight to there, to there? Let's work this out. The knight's got no protection at that point. Unless my other knight follows it in to h5. Or do I force the exchange and go for an ending? I am significantly ahead. I don't really want to lose that pawn and double up, have isolated double pawns on there. That's the issue. I'm going to move my knight to there anyway, with ideas of moving this knight to f6. My rooks are fairly idle at this point in time. This one's kind of defending the pawn on a5. So if knight in there, if bishop takes and king takes, that's okay. You see his pawns are now on light squares, which makes his light squared bishop a bad bishop, but this one much better, because this one can zip between all these light squared pawns, you see. If I move my knight there, he can't attack it with the bishop because there's a pawn in the way. We have... Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so he's now got the knight looking at f7 and potentially that. So, okay, I've got a check. I can force the exchange. That doesn't really help. This knight is unprotected right now. I could play rook a to d8. Nope, because bishop takes. So I can't defend that knight with a rook. I'm going to have to bring my queen back to c8. That does 2 things. It's defending the knight on d7, and it's attacking the rook that's trying to attack me. So he can't move his rook back to there because knight takes. It has hampered my attacking ideas, but that's something that happens in chess. Sometimes your opponent comes up with an idea and you are forced to respond. I might move my rook back to f8 to defend this pawn. So his rook can't go there, there, or there, or there. So the only squares available are these 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You see, now I can start thinking about, okay, if he goes to that square, what would my next move be? If he goes to that square, what would my next move be? My intention is to play knight f6, maybe knight g3, and then bring that knight in to support it. Got even ideas of that. If this bishop at any point comes off this diagonal, then I might be able to grab the knight. So his bishop can't go there. His bishop's still got 3 squares it can go to on that diagonal. So I think pushing f6 at this point would not be a smart idea. We're both down to 9 minutes on the clock. I can't push this pawn because he's got two pieces guarding it, bishop and queen. He's going to have to do something with his rook, and he's got to move it back to one of these squares. If he does that, I've got ideas of maybe playing rook a to b8 and go for an exchange of rooks. When you're ahead in material, exchanges tend to be to your advantage. Where's this knight actually got as well? It can't go there because of the king. It can't go there because of the king. It can't go there because of a pawn. The only real square it's got is that, and that is defended by a pawn. So I think the ideas of trapping this knight is not really feasible at this point in time. My opponent's down to 8 minutes, I've got 9. What's he going to do with his rook? I would move it probably back to here, because currently his queen is tied to defending the bishop on c2, and my queen's looking at that bishop, so he doesn't want to lose that piece. Moving it back to here would get the rook out of trouble and do one other thing, which is defending the bishop. One of the things that you really notice about when you watch Masters games, that their coordination of pieces and the way that their pieces all defend each other is a lot better than when beginners play. There you go, he's done exactly that. But he's taken a lot of time to do it. Now, decisions. I could bring my knight in this way or in this way. I'm going to bring it here. I'm going to keep the pressure up, I'm going to play a quick move. I know, because I've used the time that my opponent spent thinking to do my own thinking, so I know that that knight is safe. I mean, the bishop can capture, but then I can capture with a king or with a knight. His queen isn't really threatening right now because he's got this light squared pawn chain, so the queen and the bishop are prevented by white's own pieces from getting into my king's side of the board. That's all good for me. My opponent's under 7 minutes now. And he's having to think, which is a good thing. Maybe I could think about doubling up, maybe on the c file, so like queen to c5 check, forces a response. There's no piece that can block that check, because other than the queen, but that drops the queen. And then maybe I could move one of my rooks across to the c file, meaning I've got... Oh, okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. I wasn't quite expecting this one, because it's opening up his king. Now I have knight there. If bishop takes, pawn takes, it's opening up the board. That's not too bad. I've got to do something. I don't think that playing my knight to g3 is a very smart idea. It'd be very easy to get trapped there. That means this square and this square are covered by that pawn. Can't go there. No, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to play knight there. And I'm going to pre-move the recapture. I want to keep the pressure on. I'm just over 8 minutes, my opponent's just over 6 minutes. And of course, this is good. This is good. So he's failed to think something through. Let's just get rid of that pre-move, right? Now, with that pawn move, remember we were talking earlier on about where is this knight got, right? And it had this square that it could move to. It's its only decent escape square, because that's covered by a pawn, king, king, right? Now, having played this move, he's taken away the g4 square from his own knight, right? And I've now moved my knight there. Now, if bishop takes, pawn takes, his knight now has nowhere to go. On the very next move, I could think about capturing with the king. All right, he's come in, he's worked that out, and he's basically been forced to exchange his knight for a pawn, which is good for me. That now leaves me with 2 rooks, 2 knights on the board. Okay, so I'm now a full rook up, and I have an extra pawn. Right, he's gone for the recapture rather than the exchange, which is kind of a mistake because this pawn now only has one defender and two attackers. So I'm going to go ahead and capture with this knight. I think. Do I want to do that? That knight's got a possibility of checks, you see. There or there. So maybe this knight. Is there a problem with that? If bishop takes knight, knight recaptures, leaves a pawn vulnerable. That works out the same both ways. Let's throw in a check just to cause him some questions. Means nothing else matters when you're in check. You have to do something about the check. If his king moves somewhere silly, I could then think about diving in with my queen and causing him issues with the threat of a checkmate there on g2. He can always capture, of course. Okay, now I have another check. This is, I think, a winning situation. That was a very, very poor move by my opponent, but he's running short on time. Down to 4 minutes, but it's still 4 minutes. 4 minutes is 4 minutes. Yeah, and he's resigned. Okay, so better options than that move. Pretty much anything. I mean, he can't go there and he can't go there, right? That and that both. Well, in fact, maybe h1. Maybe h1 wouldn't be losing because it means I don't have a check on my next go. I can't play queen to g1. But that's it. So anyway, job done. I've put some demons to rest by playing calmly. And as you can tell, as I've worked through the thought processes of all of that, I've taken my time, I've thought about my opponent's options, I've thought about my own options, I've always been keenly aware of potential threats, and in the end, we won out. My opponent did make some errors, lost some material, and that tends to build as the game goes on, and build more pressure on the opponent. So I'm proud of myself. I kept my head in this particular game and won through in the end. So I hope this has been useful for you, following through the thought processes that I go through as an improving player. And that is my short lesson in how not to suck at chess. See you next time.